This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 17. I'm your host, Steve, at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network from idpguys.org. So, welcome back, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So, in this episode, we are going to be continuing our fan base series. We're going to be bringing you some of my favorites from the fantasy football community to discuss their favorite teams. So, today, we are going to be talking about the Seattle Seahawks. And I'm bringing on some guests just to add a little bit more depth, a little bit more heart to the discussion, because I might not be as plugged in or as in tune with the team like my guests are, or like my favorite team, which of course is the Philadelphia Eagles. So we're going to bring on our guests right now, starting with Jesse. You can find him on Twitter at jmoeller05. He is a writer for the League Winners. .com and shout out to the Dynasty League or to the Dynasty Lounge, I should say. Really awesome space where we can talk all things football and more. So Jesse, how you doing? And how long have you been a Seahawks fan?
So I'm doing pretty good. Outside of like Seahawks life, like everything else is good. Seahawks life isn't so great these days, but I actually went to my first game in 1987, the year I was born. My parents dressed me up like Brian Bosworth with like the mohawk and everything. So there's this little
awesome
picture of me as like a baby where I have the colors and everything. It's basically I got indoctrinated at birth is how I talk about it. So I've grown up with them my whole life and never left. It's like Seattle Seahawks forever. That's how it goes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the one small connection I have to Seattle is like growing up as I was born in '89, so I consider myself a kid of the '90s. Ken Griffey Jr. That was my first non-Philadelphia team sports jersey I was able to receive as a gift. So, I mean, I know that I'm not special for loving Ken Griffey Jr., but still, as my first non-Philadelphia sports jersey and team hat. So that was like a kind of a controversy there, just kind of thinking back on it now. But I always loved the Mariners because of Griffey and the color scheme. I just love like the blues and greens and teals and the silver and all that. So yeah, one of these days I'd love to make it out that way. But either way, appreciate you having you on the show, and I think we're gonna have a lot of fun tonight.
Absolutely, yeah. I think every kid of the '90s pretty much loved Griffey at some point. Like
that's right.
We all grew up with him. He was all like, I'm not left-handed at all, but I would go up and do the left-handed swing and all that fun stuff. Just because, I mean, how could you not love Ken Griffey Jr.?
Yeah, we would like imitate different like swings of the day, like in our backyard playing wiffle ball, and you held the bat in close like Griffey, you know. And this is what you had to do. That was just the only way to do it. But that's awesome. All right, and our next guest is Scott. You can find him on Twitter at MunderDifflin FF. He does a variety of content at the great IBT Media, and he is a writer for FantasyData.com. So, Scott, how you doing, and how long have you been a Seahawks fan?
I'm good. I'm hot. Jesse and I were talking about it. It's hot up here. We're not used to this type of heat, so I'm sweating. But I'm good. I've been a Seahawks fan pretty much the same amount of time as Jesse. I basically figured out what it was like, what it meant to root for a home team right around 1987, 1988. Before that, I was aware of sports, but I just kind of rooted for whatever. So it was right around 87, 88. My first Seahawks game ever, I don't remember exactly when, but it was in the Kingdom, and it was against the Chiefs back when the Seahawks were part of the AFC West. And let's see. So, yeah, I've been a Seahawks fan for better or for worse ever since. I did get to see – I saw Beastquake happen live. I was at the stadium for that. So,
jeez. Oh, it's awesome.
One of the most memorable experiences, although – honestly, my most memorable experience probably as a Seahawks fan was outside the stadium in the championship game in 2005 against the Panthers. How loud that stadium, because that was right when the whole crowd noise thing was really becoming a well-known thing about how loud it was there. We got out of our car in the parking lot, and it was deafening outside the stadium. Yeah, I'll never forget. Wow. I'm getting goosebumps right now just talking about it, and it was 17 years ago.
It was incredible. It was like I went to that game, and we try to talk to the person sitting next to you. You couldn't hear them. Like you were trying to talk, like they were like right here, and they'd be like, "What? I can't hear you." And it was just like it was a ridiculous experience. Like I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I'm glad you guys brought that up because like they always make this big thing about it, like on the TV broadcasts, and probably probably the most loud event I've been to is like at like Penn State football games, which is like pretty well known for like a big crowd and everything else and the noise level. But so it sounds like it is obviously very true with like the decibel levels. You can't even talk to the person who's next to you. That's definitely is on my bucket list of kind of like stadiums or experiences to check out. So that's great. That's really neat.
You might
Yeah.
need to give it a few years before it's that
Yeah.
loud again.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll discuss plenty of that. But several years ago, well, I guess a few years ago, I did see the Seahawks play against the Eagles in Philadelphia. This was like a early or mid-November game, it's like a mid-afternoon game, at least in Philadelphia. It's like a 4:25 start, and this is with Lynch and Russell Wilson. Sherman was still on the team, so it was like kind of like the peak of that regime, and it was one of the most brutal games to watch because like the Seahawks were just so dominant at that time, and that is just what I think of when I think of the Seattle Seahawks. So it is going to be a very odd year, and I'm excited to hear your guys' perspective on that. Even though it might be a little bit of a bummer, I still appreciate you guys coming on and talking it out here with me. So what we're going to do is basically just start with a summary of the 2021 season, work our way through free agency, the draft, and then looking ahead to the 2022 season in terms of the actual teams' wins and losses and things like this, but also the fantasy football implications for all things related to the Seahawks. So last season they finished with a 7-10 record. Unfortunately, last in the NFC West, in a very competitive NFC West, with three teams making the playoffs, and of course the Super Bowl champion was also in that division. In the middle of the season, they did temporarily lose Russell Wilson to the very nasty finger injury that he suffered in the middle of the Thursday night game against the Rams, which is really just one of the most tilting like fantasy football scenarios. Right? It's a first game of the slate. It's a position that you're really not going to bench unless you really have like elite options above, as far as I'm concerned. If you have Russell Wilson, you're starting him, so when he leaves halfway through the game, it just really puts you behind the eight ball. And then what I do remember about that broadcast was they just kept showing the finger all like bent up and out of place. I'm like, why are they doing that? Like, we don't need to see that anymore. Let's just move on. Anyway, unfortunately, the Seahawks now enter a new era without Russell Wilson. We'll touch on the trade that went down in March in just a moment. And I just want to touch quickly on the recent news. Chris Carson, the I would argue the star running back for the team, is officially retiring after having the cervical fusion. I do think this is probably the best call for his long-term health and quality of life moving forward. I love that guy. Awesome story. Just kind of came, I want to say out of nowhere, but he was a late a seventh round draft pick, I believed, or yeah. And he just was one of these players. It's weird to say out loud. You see these tweets all the time, but he was this guy who had like that like dog in him, right? So I really do appreciate him as a player. Sad to see him go, but I really do think it's probably for the best, because even when like Peyton Manning had his cervical fusion, we're kind of like all cringing, like, please don't get hit too hard, like, you know what I mean, and things like that. So just for a running back, you're just asking for trouble with that type of an injury that could get bad quick. So yeah, going back to that Russell Wilson trade, the Seahawks sent Russell Wilson and a 2022 fourth for quarterback Drew Lock, tight end Noah Fant, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, 2 first-round picks, 2022 and 2023, 2 seconds, also 2022 and 2023, and a 2022 fifth to the Broncos. So, guys, what did you think about that trade at the time, back in early March? And now that the draft and everything has taken place, how are you processing that now? Is it bittersweet? Was it a gut punch? We'll start with you, Jesse.
Initially, I very much despised it. Like, I don't, and then the corresponding moves after that don't really make sense to me, because they made all those moves and then they re-signed veterans like they're still trying to compete this year. And then they drafted a running back. So there's like all these dominoes that fell afterwards, which I didn't fully get, and I still don't understand the full plan with it. So I'm really looking forward to 2023. If it goes as I expect it to go to, I'm just very confused about the actual plan of where they're going, because like they're probably going to re-sign DK here soon. They have Lockett locked up for a couple, and like they have all this money in these veterans, so it's curious to see how they're going to make this work without a quarterback. I mean, like we know who Geno Smith is, and Drew Lock is he's maddening as a quarterback, to say the least. So I'm still like, I guess, still processing it, even though it's been months. I'm just not sure on how it's going to end going into this year. Like I expect them to be very like middling this year, so they won't get a great draft pick, and then you're kind of just stuck in this in between, which I think is a very bad spot for teams to be. So that's kind of a short way of saying where I'm at with it right now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. How about you, Scott? Any different thoughts there? Yeah.
No, not really. I will say it was kind of funny because like the second article I wrote for Fantasy Data, they were like, it was before any of the big trades happened, and one of the assigned articles was your thoughts on a potential Russell Wilson trade. And so I was like, oh, I'll take that. I'm a Seahawks fan. So I took it and spent hours and hours writing an article about how there's no way he was going to be traded. And then like literally 2 days after it was published, like, he got traded. But my logic with it was, I thought that they would keep him. He would play this season, and then they wouldn't re-sign him. But I think one way or another, Russell was on his way out of town very soon. Mm-hmm. So you hate to be like, well, it's good that we got something and not nothing. But I mean, it is quite a haul that they were able to get. It did. We'll see what drafting a running back in the second round where that goes, but it allowed them to get what I thought was a good value defensive end in Boye Mafe, and the running back, because they had both those picks. And then I like Noah Fant. He's young, but I do agree with Jesse. It's just they're a team that are too. I don't know how NFL teams operate. We as fans and we as fantasy analysts and we're like, oh yeah, okay, so you just lose all your games, you get the best quarterback, and then you do this, and you do that, and it's all very straightforward and simple. But like,
yeah,
the Seahawks organization is not looking at this like, well, okay, let's just lose, and you know what I mean? So it's like, they're too stubborn for their own good. Obviously, they're going to try and win, and it's Pete Carroll, so he's going to sugarcoat every single move. So I'm curious to watch how it plays out. I'm not expecting much this season, which honestly, in a weird, morbid way, is a little bit of a break. I'm not going to have to stress it as much. I plan on watching the games kind of from different angles, watching some of these young defensive players develop, try just knowing that like, okay, for the first time in 10 years, they're not a competitor.
Yeah.
So
it's funny that you mentioned Pete Carroll sugarcoating, because that's like his thing 101, what he does.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I love how when they made sure they got Drew Lock in the deal, he was like, oh yeah, we had him graded out as a first round talent back in that year. And I was like, why does that matter at this point? Like,
it doesn't matter.
It's just like, but that's what Pete Carroll
wrong.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like, so you would have taken him and done what with Russell Wilson? But it just cracks me up because he's always like over the top positive. And even with like Geno Smith, he's like, well, yeah, Geno's our guy now. And then they're going into camp, you don't really know what's going on. So you're like, okay, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's got to be really tough. I remember when the Eagles got rid of like Donovan McNabb back in the day. It was like, oh, this is like, he just was such an integral part of like that era and going like having like a lot of deep playoff runs and stuff. So I mean, obviously, I would say that Russell Wilson like is better in a lot of ways, but either way, obviously with the Super Bowl win and everything else and get into another Super Bowl. As far as I'm concerned, as long as Russell Wilson was active, like the Seahawks were never like out of a game really, and he just was one of my favorite. I mean, he's still playing obviously, but like he just, from the moment he was drafted, he really just was like one of my favorite players just once he was playing in the NFL. Aside from all the corny stuff off the field, all that went away once he was playing. You know what I mean? He just was a phenomenal competitor, unbelievably efficient. There's very few quarterbacks that I would want leading my team if I needed to like take the ball down the field than like Russell Wilson. So I was devastated for Seahawks fans, but just as a fan of Russell Wilson, I am also excited for the opportunity in Denver. But either way, I'm not trying to like drive the wound deeper or anything.
Well, I mean, really, as Seahawks fans, like everything fluctuates in the NFL. We had a quarterback who never missed a game from his rookie year on, and we made the playoffs pretty much every season for 10 years. Like, that's a pretty good run in the whole scheme of things. So that's also why I'm just like, I don't know if maybe it's just my own self-defense to not get too emotionally attached anymore, where I'm just like, oh, this is fine. And once that first kickoff goes and Drew Lock or whoever throws his first interception, might be a different attitude. But for now, it's just like, it was a pretty substantial run for a quarterback to go that long without getting injured. And I mean, Jesse knows, like, as a fan, man, I went through some stuff with Russell Wilson. Like that Green Bay comeback in the NFC Championship game, like that was like a out of body experience for me during that comeback. Like I can't really even explain it.
That was a roller coaster of emotions, that game.
Oh my God.
I've never been as low and as high in one game. Like, he was the worst quarterback in the league, and then they came back, and I couldn't believe it. And then the pass to Curse, I just like literally jumped out of my seat and screamed. I was so excited.
And then the Super Bowl, the walk-off pick that I didn't watch. Did not watch the replay of that interception by Malcolm Butler until last year.
Oh wow!
That's what I mean.
That long?
Like, anytime it would come on, I would turn away. And then last year, I was like, "You're being childish." To myself, so I forced myself to watch it and kind of started to make peace with it. But it was honestly, as a fan, like, it was after that game and that outcome that I really started to change the way I allowed myself to become so attached to the team and to the outcomes of the games. Like, I was just tired of it ruining my entire week if they lost. And like, that hurts. That loss hurts so bad, because it's like, how insanely hard it is to repeat as a Super Bowl. And as soon as you lose that game, it's like, and I said it out loud, I was like, I don't know when we're going to be back here.
Nope.
It just doesn't happen like this. And here we are.
That game broke the dynasty.
Oh,
there's like a
lot of things. Yeah.
There's a trail of just crumbs right after that, where you see all these things happen, and it just slowly disintegrated over time.
Have either of you guys seen the movie Mr. Baseball with Tom Selleck?
Yes.
No.
Is that the one? Is that the one where he's
in Japan?
I'm thinking of a different.
Are you talking about
Bernie Mac? I'm thinking of a movie where a guy, like, he strikes out in high school, ends a game in baseball, and he pictures what it would have been like if he had hit the home run, and his whole life's different.
Oh wow, that's fascinating.
Can't never remember the name of the movie, but I think about that. I think about what the NFL would look like, what the Seahawks would look like, where people would be playing if they had just given the ball to Lynch.
Or like, and Brady's life completely changes as far as, like, they haven't won it 8 years up until that point. If they don't win that game, who knows when they get back, because that's a devastating loss for them. So it's just like this. It's a whole
pivotal moment in sports history for sure.
Yep.
And like, even off of that, like, does Jimmy G have the opportunity to go to a different team, or does he stay? Like, who knows? It's like the ripples of that. It's really fascinating. The ripples of that are pretty enormous. Yeah. But Scott, I like the one point you made up about you hit a point of not being like emotionally attached. I hit that point for myself. It was actually 10 years ago. Watching the Philadelphia Phillies actually get eliminated in the playoffs against the St. Louis Cardinals on a Game 5. This was a game, I don't know if you remember this. Ryan Howard hit a grounder towards Achilles to end the game.
Oh, I know that. Yep.
Yeah.
Roy Halladay, or I think it was Roy Halladay or Cliff Lee. It was one of them. I think it was Halladay. He gave up one run in the first inning, and there was like no more runs after that. It was just a 1-0 game. Game 5 it was like the clincher. I was so mad and upset at that game. We were doing like a day trip to like New York with like my in-laws and stuff. I just was pissed off all day long. And I'm like, this is mental. Like, I cannot be this upset over something that's completely out of my control, because I will be very happy if like my teams win, and I will be upset if my teams lose. But I'm at a point now where it's like the sting of like a normal loss, it's just fleeting. It's just gone now, So I think it is like a healthy step to find this point of fandom where you can appreciate what the team's doing, but just not so much like live and die with every decision or every loss,
And it's a trade-off. So you have to, I mean, for me, I had to make a decision because like part of the reason I allowed myself to be that way so long was because, at least in my head, the way I saw it was, well, if I'm struggling that much when it's bad, think about how sweet it's going to be. Like what is the darkest light is always right before the day, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
The sun shines brighter after a heavy rain, that type of stuff. So like that was part of it, so it was like when they did win that Super Bowl, like I was still in that mode and it was just cloud nine for months. And so I understand that it's a little bit of a sacrifice. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. That Super Bowl win actually kind of changed how I viewed football. Like I just saw like how it completely changed so many people. Like their attitude shifted so much. And I was like, man, you're that heavily invested in football. And like, this is something I grew up my whole life while I was always heavily invested. But I would like see these other people and they would just be so up and down all the time. And then I'd look at myself and be like, it's just not healthy. Slowly trickled. Yeah. And then finally, like when I started writing for fantasy content, I was like, I can't do both of these because it's just getting in the way of me trying to be like objective while I'm watching the Seahawks. So now I prefer to watch the Red Zone over Seahawks games just because like I don't want to get that invested in every game where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what's going on? So I'm just like,
well, and it's been helpful too to make that same transition in fantasy because I used to get just as pissed off in fantasy if I lost. You know what I mean? And that's utterly ridiculous. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but I would sit there and watch every freaking tenth of a point accumulate, every yard and fractional scoring, until the end of Monday Night Football. And it's just not a sustainable, healthy way to be a fan. It's supposed to be fun. So
yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I think for me, now being in like 15 whatever dynasty leagues, like there's some leagues I'm going to watch closer than others, but it's like there's so many different scenarios happening all at once. It's like it's just see how it goes. You know what I mean? But obviously, you have your higher stakes ones, or the ones that like you have your longest running leagues. You obviously are going to watch a little closer. But I think that for me has helped me on my Sundays and just through the whole slate. It's not as devastating because I used to literally just look like I didn't have cable in college. I just would like watch the games like on the Gamecast on my phone or on my computer all day.
Yep.
All day. And just like mostly just pissy, you know what I mean? Like, please, someone just score or whatever.
Just vultured a touchdown. Yep.
That's right. And this is just not a way to live,
Somebody
but
scores a touchdown, it gets called back by penalty.
That's so diving into multiple leagues has made like a massive difference for that. Where I'm like, my home league we've been going on like 12 years, so that one I'm pretty invested in. But the rest of them, it's kind of just like check it in, see like, all right, cool, like winning or losing, and then I'm like.
Yeah, last year I went from like I've had 2 at 1.3, but mainly 2 home leagues for 15 years. And last year I jumped from that to 15 total leagues. Like a lot of when I first kind of joined the space, I was really into like joining all these different charity leagues, and I still am. The charity leagues are really fun, Scott Fishbowl included. But it got to the point where I was like, I am not physically able to get stressed about all this because I can't. There's not enough time in the day for me to stress about all this.
Yeah.
The other thing that's been just wonderful. I mean, part of it too is I love creating content. I love looking for interesting things to produce and write and all that kind of stuff. So that coming at it from that angle has helped with my objectivity when it comes to things so much. And I think it's only going to help me continue to dominate my home leagues. You know what I mean?
It's funny. I've kind of transitioned from being upset that my fantasy team is losing or excited that they're winning compared to like my calls of the week happening or not happening, so now it's like a whole nother, it's like, well, I said a whole lot about Trey Sermon. Let's see what that was a big one for me last year. And that was a rough season for Stevie over here because of seeing that play out. Oh my God.
We've all been there.
A lot of people got that one wrong.
Yeah,
oh no,
yes,
but still, like it's amazing how that has flipped. Like obviously, I really want to win like the leagues I'm in, but I also, if I'm dishing out advice, I want the advice to be good too.
I'm the
Yeah,
same way. Like and I'm not just paying lip service to it. I truly would rather help other people with their teams.
Yeah,
because I mean, for me too. Like I've never really been like play for money guy. Like I'm playing in some charity leagues, they're for money, but like I'm not a big gambler, so I'm not like in it for any kind of money. Like a lot of people are like, oh, how could you even possibly be motivated if it's not for money? It's like I treat a free league the exact same way I treat a money league.
100%.
You know what I mean? There's no difference. So, then I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm with you though. I want like my home league trophy more than like the prize pool. I want my name etched because we have like a little etch. Like we
so do we.
create. We have an engraving that we nail on at our live draft every year of the champion of the year before. I've been to two championships, haven't won one yet, and this will be our 17th season. So I want my name on that trophy more than the sum of all the years combined of the money that I could have won.
But you know how it goes in home leagues. It's just like if you studied a book of Hold'em poker for 5 years and then you go play poker. If you come up against somebody who doesn't know the game of poker, you might lose to them. You know what I mean? Like that. It happens in fantasy football too, where I'm like just trashing somebody's pick, a draft pick they made or who they chose to start. And then it just so happens that game against me, that who they chose to start scores 2 random touchdowns. And you know what I mean? It's just
it's like when people knock analytics. I'm like, no, it's not 100%. Like they're just giving you a probability it's going to happen. So like people constantly knock that. I'm like, no, like there is still a chance you will be 100% wrong on this.
Analytics is all about just upping the odds of your decision. People are like, oh, you told me to. It's like, no.
But yeah, I would much rather be right on telling people what to do than like my team because, I take pride in my work. So I don't want to look like an idiot like 24/7. Or I'm just like, they're like, you told me to do this. And I'm like, I know. I'm so sorry. I screwed that up.
I mean, I don't know if I can speak for you guys, but it's a little bit different too. Like when I'm answering a question for somebody else's lineup, I'm able to kind of treat my approach to the question a little bit different. When it's my team, I go to irrational places. I don't, logic can go out the window when I'm making my decisions. You know what I mean? So that's also why I really like helping other people, because I feel like I approach it very objectively and, with no take lock involved, no homerism involved, all that stuff goes out the window. So
absolutely. I have the same experience. It's quite fascinating, for sure. But yeah, so it seems like we're kind of eerie on the Seahawks this season, right? We're both kind of are looking ahead to 2023. So I just want to kind of summarize the free agency moves, then we'll get into the NFL draft selections. So some of the notable losses, we obviously already touched on Russell Wilson. Another major loss was a linebacker, Bobby Wagner. And then, of course, just another brutal goes right to the Rams. Like that just really stinks. Lost on DJ Reed and then tight end Gerald Everett. Now that kind of becomes like an addition by subtraction as far as I'm concerned, as they bring in Noah Fant. And then with the other additions, quarterback Drew Lock in that trade. And then they were able to retain Geno Smith, as well as linebacker Uchenna Nwosu. I hope I said that right. I've been having like a little bit where I have a figurative jar where every time I mispronounce a player's name, I throw a quarter in. So I think I got through that one okay. So I'm a quarter richer today. But anyway, what are your thoughts on these free agency moves? Obviously, we touched on Wilson and Drew Lock and that. How are we feeling about losing Bobby Wagner? Is that just like, well, you might as well just lose another superstar if you don't have Wilson, or where are you guys at with that?
I think, I mean, it was similar to Wilson with Wagner. I mean, obviously, Bobby Wagner's been a huge, huge part, I mean, basically borderline NFL defensive player of the year every year he played.
Yep.
Came out in the same draft, second round pick out of Utah State, so looking back at that draft, second round Bobby Wagner, third round Russell Wilson.
It's awesome.
So it's actually the results of those few drafts back then gave a very long grace period to John Schneider and Pete
Yes.
Carroll with their picks.
Mm-hmm.
But damn it, lost my train of thought again, you guys.
Was Sherman that same year, or was he the year prior?
I think he was the year before, but he was fifth round.
Okay.
Chancellor was fifth
Yeah, exactly.
round. So Bobby Wagner. So I don't think it would have been smart to extend him, to pay him a big payday. His numbers were going down. Jordan Brooks was really taking the reins, leading. As far as raw tackling, number of tackles goes, and just being a force on the defense. Wagner, he wasn't really. I didn't really pay attention after he went to the Rams, but that hurt from like an emotional, nostalgic standpoint.
Yeah.
But that core has been floating away for quite some time.
Slowly being pulled apart. Yeah.
So, I mean, at some point you have to move on to something new. They did re-sign KJ Wright, I saw today. They brought KJ Wright back, so that's kind of the opposite direction. But he's one of those old school guys. But I mean, it's going to be a completely different team. Jury's still out for me on some of these moves, because it's just such a different. For 10 years, my perspective going into an off season has been such that like we're a Super Bowl contender, for the most part, or at least we're a playoff contender. And so this year, it's just like I'm adjusting to like, oh, is that move smart for a rebuild, or is that trying to win now? Like I'm adjusting to try and like maneuver that as a fan.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I brought it up earlier, but when the Eagles got rid of Donovan McNabb, I think in the same season or the year after, they also traded away, or they didn't extend Brian Dawkins, like just a total face of the defense for many years, and that was just like a total gut punch. Like just pay the guy. Like he's responsible for a lot of the success that the team has had. So yeah, I mean, so that was like a boom sort of a transition as well. But it's horrible. But yeah, so I am just kind of curious on your guys' thoughts now. Retained Geno Smith, brought in Drew Lock. Geno Smith for his career as a starter has a 13-21 record. Drew Lock 9-15 for his career as a starter. Geno Smith obviously played in that time when Russell Wilson was out. Actually, kind of surprising, he was only out for just a couple of weeks, I guess like 3.5 weeks with the finger situation. But Geno Smith did go 1-2 in that time. Do you guys have any preference on? Well, a two-part question. Who do you think the team will pick to be the starter in week 1? And then who do you want to be the starter in week 1? We'll start with you, Jesse.
So this is like the most confusing part about where I don't understand where this is going.
Sure.
So if they want to compete this year, they're going to start Geno just because he gives them that floor where they know he's not going to kill them. And he knows the system. He's been with them a long time. So they have that confidence in him to be able to at least, play respectable ball-ish kind of, and then if you really want to chase that upside, maybe you hit with Drew Lock, or if he falls on his face, it works that way too, where you get a high draft pick. So Geno Smith's kind of the middle ground, and I think that's where they're going to go just because I don't know if they have confidence in Lock. And everything so far feels like he still hasn't fully caught up to the system and is learning it. And for someone they brought in and then he got second team reps in OTAs the whole time, I found that very strange. Like, why would you bring in this young guy and then just let Geno get all the reps if that's who you're going to go with? So I would bet on Geno, and I still think he's going to be the starting quarterback. If they decide to go the other way, then that will tell me a lot about how they feel about this team.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
Oh, no. Yeah. Like it is confusing. And I totally agree with those two routes basically. And I agree. I think if in their eyes, they want to compete for a wild card or whatever it is, then they will likely go with Geno for the reasons you said. I want them to go with Drew Lock personally. The reason I want them to go with Drew Lock is because I'm not saying that there's more than a 0.5% chance he might actually be good in this system. It's such a long shot, but Geno Smith is not the answer. We do know that. He's not the long-term answer. And so I think about it somewhat simplistically. It's like if it's a rebuild and the quarterback of the future is not on the team right now, then why waste time and seasons messing around? Play Drew Lock. If he hits, that's great. If he doesn't, then you get a high draft pick. I just, like, a lot of people over the offseason come to me as a Seahawks and they're like, ooh, do you want them to get Baker? And I'm like, no, I don't. It's like the future of the Seahawks at the quarterback position, once the offseason kind of settled a little bit, was not available in the NFL, in my opinion. And I'm probably thinking about it too simplistically. That's what I mean. Like, the organizations probably aren't thinking about it like that. But for me, it's like the fastest way from point A to point B, which is being a solid contender again, is a quarterback that is not in the league yet. So why would you spend money on Baker Mayfield? Why would you bring in Jimmy Garoppolo? Why would you start Geno Smith? But again, they're not going to be like, yeah, let's lose for a draft pick. That's not the way they operate.
Yeah, that's what I struggle with so much.
I just think Drew Lock, it would be maddening, but we know we're not going anywhere this year. It'd be more fun. I think he'd be way more fun than Geno Smith, like freestyle rapping on the sidelines and like all that stuff. You know what I mean? He's got some swag, so we'll see.
Yeah, and you have like all the change on the line too, which is a really big deal. Like, Dwayne Brown's gone. They brought in Charles Cross, who's a first round, and then they got Abe Lucas in the third, I think. And people are talking him up, but he's still a third round rookie, so it's very unsure. And you have question marks very much on your line and on the D line as well, where they couldn't generate a lick of pressure last year. So I don't know how you plan on winning if you cannot protect your quarterback or generate pressure on the quarterback on the other side of the ball. So that's like my biggest question marks about this team, or the line. Like, if the line works, it will help the quarterbacks, but like, I have no idea if it's going to work this year.
Yeah, that's why I think some of these draft picks they've made, some of these moves they made, they scream, 2023, 2024. Like picking, even though Lucas is a third, I think he's in Lucas, right? Am I right on that? Yeah. Lucas from Washington State. Even though he's a third rounder, them spending a first round and third round draft capital on the O-line, that's not something the Seahawks are known for, really. It's funny enough, it happened right when Russell Wilson left, but that could look great in a year or two. But this year, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like, it's not going to happen. So to me, starting Geno Smith doesn't really make much sense. Other than just like getting through the season.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Or if they clearly know Drew Lock's terrible. Like, that's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the QB battle, if you will, through training camp will be, or even in the preseason, because I think they both are going to get significant reps, in those games, because they really are trying to see, what's going to happen there. I secretly am rooting for Drew Lock to be the starter, just because I agree. I think it would be a little bit more fun. He is also my QB4 in Scott Fishbowl, so just very selfishly, I'm hoping something happens there with that. But it'll be just a very fascinating situation to see. But there are these like team foundational pillars that are very much either missing or in transition on the Seahawks team. I think that they did address them to a certain degree in the draft. So we'll kind of review a little bit of that now. Touched on Charles Cross at pick 9. He actually was one of the exact hits I had from episode 1. I did a mock draft, and Charles Cross is who I had for the Seahawks at 9. He was one of 4 exact hits. So I don't know if that's good or bad. I was just like, hey, that actually happened. So that was fun. Then in round 2, they got the edge and linebacker, Boy Maff. And then round 2, 41. Next pick, Kenneth Walker, the running back. And then round 3, Abraham Lucas, the tackle. Round 4, Kobe Bryant, the cornerback. Then rounds 5 and 7, they went cornerback, linebacker, wide receiver, wide receiver. So overall, what would you guys say was your favorite pick, and what was your least favorite pick? And of the players that they drafted, would you have had any preferences either at different positions or with the specific players they selected? What I mean by that is, like, say at number 9,
Mhm.
would you guys have rather have gotten Willis or Pickett if they were going quarterback, or were you guys out on this QB class? Where were you guys at going through the draft? We'll start with you, Scott.
Well, for starters, I actually was, I mean, as a fan, pretty much any fan of any team after the draft's over, they're like, yeah, we killed that draft. But like, as a Seahawks fan, watching some of the questionable kind of reaches and like getting pretty cute with stuff over the past 8-9 years, I was actually pretty happy that they kind of did what they should have done, at least definitely in the first round. I was praying they didn't take a quarterback from this class in the first
Gotcha.
round.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, not at all. I honestly, I wasn't really interested in the quarterbacks from this class. If they could have, I think at one point, I think it was late. It was getting later, and if Ritter was still there, I was like, well, you might as well take a shot. But then he went, and I mean, the NFL said their piece on this quarterback class. You had Pickett in the first, and that was it until like the third or fourth. So I mean,
That's right.
So I certainly didn't want that. My favorite pick, honestly, was probably Boy Mafe or Mafe or what.
Again, that's a name. That's a coin in the jar.
No, see, the thing is I was gonna mention that earlier because I make it a point when I'm doing a show sheet. If I don't know how to pronounce something, I go and look up how to pronounce it, just out of basic respect. And then I still did that. So throw a quarter in for me. I'll get it back at some point. I like that pick because I really nerded out on pre-draft mocking, and I did a study on like all these mock drafts across the industry, just trying to get some averages. I mean, mock drafting in the actual NFL draft is insanely difficult. Like you get 1 or 2 right, you get Charles Cross right at 9. Hey, that's a good year. But
yeah.
he was a first round grade in a lot of different mocks I saw for a good month leading up to the draft. So the fact that also, there's a little bit of symbolism there too, because that was the pick they got from Denver that they were able to use to, I think, get, a good young athletic defensive end / linebacker. So that was probably my favorite pick. Yeah. What about you, Jesse?
So my favorite pick was Cross, just because he was in that tier of tackles, which were like the top 3. And I was curious, like, I was under the impression like the quarterbacks were actually better. Like people kept mocking Pickett and they would get Willis, and then there was maybe like another guy going. So I was like, maybe we go early round 2 QB. But of course that did not happen. And it turned out like there was just smoke all around all these quarterbacks where they just weren't good. And the NFL told us how they felt about those quarterbacks. But Cross was my favorite because he is supposed to be a foundational piece that you can sit on your line, forget him for the next decade, and you build around him. And left tackle is one of like the 3 most important positions in the NFL. So I was all for that. Mafe was interesting. I hated the Walker pick just because I don't understand why you take a running back who has a short shelf life if you don't have the quarterback solution like figured out. So It feels like you're wasting his prime with not a good quarterback, and that just my brain like that never meshes.
Mm-hmm.
So when they took that pick, I was like, what are we doing? Like, I know he's a very good runner. Like, he will be a good runner. He's probably not going to be a pass catcher, but that's a different story. But he will be a good runner, and it might not be till 2023 until that happens. But like, I will be happy we have him. But like that pick initially, like I needed some time to digest that. I was just like, I could never understand as a GM like rationalizing that pick. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me if you're not going to win. So that was my biggest like, WTF? What are you guys doing moment?
For sure. Yeah, no, I definitely had a similar thought. And I did like him as a prospect coming out. But it's like with like Rashad Penny there, and that's already is kind of a hairy situation. We'll talk about that in a little while. that seemed to be a bit of a head scratcher, almost like a luxury pick that they just didn't that they couldn't afford to take. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But either way, I think because of some of the question marks, so with the quarterback class, like, and you guys said it, like the NFL told us exactly how they felt about this class, and it's this whole hype machine leading up to the NFL Combine, and then the mock drafts. Like, oh my God, the millions of mock drafts you see. I really was like on the edge of my seat to see like when some of these quarterbacks were going to go. Then most of them didn't even go until day two or day
Mhm.
two. Yeah, it was just what was kind of remarkable to see that. But
Well,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
were
so
the
coming, we were coming off like, we were coming off like a crazy amount of quarterbacks the previous year in the first
Mhm.
round.
yep,
My biggest reason was just like I didn't have a good feeling about the quarterback class, and knowing the Seahawks are headed, as
Mhm.
fans just call it what it is a rebuild to kind of restock and reboot. Nothing will set you back longer and more detrimentally than making the
Yes,
wrong choice on a first round quarterback.
absolutely.
Right where the Seahawks are now. Like if they had done that, if they had picked somebody and it didn't pan out, like then you're committed to that quarterback. Like
Mhm.
so, I mean, the only team that I think ever just said screw it, we're picking another early quarterback was when the Cardinals took Kyler Murray so soon after Rosen.
that's
Mhm.
right. Yeah,
That's Josh Rosen, so that makes sense.
Oh, poor Josh Rosen.
I
no,
know.
but it's
I'm
a pretty
sorry, Josh. I'm sure you're
remarkable.
watching.
It is a remarkable like decision though, because they take Rosen at 10, and
It
then
was.
at 1 overall the next year they had like that was that the Steve Wilkes year where like he just was like the coach and they just gone after a single season, and
Well,
then they're picking first. It would have been just remarkable to just say, we already have our guy, let's just get like. But I
But that's
think
what the majority of teams. That's what happens. Like no, they don't want to be wrong.
that's
mhm.
right. Yeah, so it is very
Let's see
interesting,
here.
and it is wild that even with the Josh Rosen pick again, if you're watching, hello and sorry, it is remarkable how the Cardinals have like steadily improved year over year with Kyler Murray as the quarterback. The first season was obviously a little bit of a struggle, and then chipping away, and then they make the playoffs, last year, and then early exit. But either way, it is just remarkable. It's like you want to just kind of keep to that process and not just kind of like eat it, if you will. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think all said and done, I think the Seahawks would be wise to kind of focus their sights on a quarterback in next year's class, because and this kind of comes into like this next little section here. After reviewing the schedule, what do you guys think is like a realistic amount of like wins and losses? So like if like Jesse, you said earlier, you think that they could be like kind of like middling. So do you think
Mhm.
that could mean 8 wins? Do you think that means 7 wins? Like, do you think they're going to be in a position to get one of like the better like QBs for next year? Or
Yeah, like I don't have a lot of faith this year. And like so I should have rephrased what I said. Like I think they're going to be like more on the more bad side of opposed to
yeah,
middling. The over under is 5.5, and that's like a very tricky spot for me. Like
okay,
I was looking at the schedule and I was like, I could pick about 4 wins out. And then outside of that, and I was just like, man, a lot of these games just look tough. And I really was like, well, like I kind of want to take the under. I just don't have
yeah,
faith. Like looking through who they play, like they got to go to London. They play the Bucks. There's a game against the Bears they could like win. They got the Falcons. You have the Jets who could be good, and like the Panthers. Outside of that, oh yeah, the Giants. So that's like the 5 games. Like I can see like they have a decent shot. Outside of that, there's just like it's not a good look for them. Like I don't see how they beat the over. Honestly, like I struggle with it, and I
Yeah,
still can't.
I mean Vegas can be so accurate. I'm
Mm-hmm.
always just like, how do they? Because every time there's an over under, I'm like, all right, and then I look at it and I'm like, damn it, it's like
yeah.
that's
That's
exactly
right
where I want to
there.
pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
like a
So-
wizard behind the curtain back there. He's magic.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest question, like, I don't think they're going to be competitive. I don't, it'd be a fluke for them to beat any of the top caliber teams, in my opinion. What I don't know what it's going to look like yet is how they'll look against the other mediocre competition. I just don't know. I don't know that yet. I don't know how bad they actually are. So, but if I had to wager a bet, I would take the under.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I was
So,
betting, I was betting money.
So I say, 4 or 5 wins. I think that puts them like pick 5 or 6 at least, maybe
In that
7.
range.
Yeah. So, well, I guess in that range. So I don't know. I think that would be a pretty good shot at like CJ Stroud or Bryce Young or whoever. It'd be interesting.
Depends on, yeah, it just depends on which other teams are ahead and if they need a quarterback.
Yeah, like
that's right. Yeah.
It'll probably be those tier guys down, like Will Levis or somebody like that. Because if you need Stroud or Young, it's gonna have to be like 1 or 2 more than likely, just because the way teams feel about those guys.
Yeah, for sure. So like how far away do you think the Seahawks potentially are from like being able to compete in the division again? Like, are you looking like 2 years ahead, 3 years, like 1 year ahead? I asked a similar question when I had when I did my Falcons show with Joe Griffin and Akash, and they were pretty much looking at 2024 for their Atlanta Falcons. You think that's like a similar time frame for the Seahawks as well?
Yeah, I would say so. Like they need these draft picks to pan out, and then you can at least like ideally take a next step forward 2023, and maybe you're like a fringe contender if you figure out your quarterback situation or whatever. At least you'd be competitive, and then ideally 2024, you have the quarterback ready to roll, the team is complete, and like you're taking the next step forward where the Rams are falling off. You don't know what's going on with the 49ers at that point. I mean, Trey Lance is scary, but maybe it doesn't work out. And then the Cardinals, if Kyler Murray studies or not, I guess, then maybe you could take him. But yeah, I'm thinking 2024 is like ideally the range where.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, in a way, I think that's best case, earliest probably. I mean, the Rams are eventually going to run out of money, and then you know what I mean. So they won't
supposedly, yeah.
The draft picks. They like trade all these draft picks and spend all this money, and then you look and they're like, oh, they have 9 draft picks. It's like, what's happening?
Yeah, and then they're just all superstars.
But like, for me, I mean, the quarterback situation, I haven't looked far enough ahead. I don't know what potential existing NFL quarterbacks are going to become available or whatever, who would be a potential answer. But if you're talking about like a rookie quarterback coming in, being the future of the team, I mean, I would really want it to be one of those top 2 guys. I mean, that would be ideal, even if it means trading up. So let's say you get one of those top 2 guys. I mean, best case scenario is another Russell Wilson situation where you bring him in and he takes you to the playoffs his rookie year, but like that's not very common. So to me, if you get a rookie in the next draft, it's the best case for the team to kind of gel and become competitive probably is the his second year.
Gotcha.
To Jesse's point, now you've got a running back with wear on his tires because you drafted him before your quarterback, which doesn't make sense.
For sure. Okay. So at the end of the day, we do want this show to be a fantasy football show. I do enjoy a lot of the basic standard football talk, but we're going to get into the real good stuff now. So you guys can go any direction you want, dynasty, redraft, or both if you want. But we're going to talk about offensive players in the Seahawks system to either target at their projected cost and players to fade at their projected cost. Jesse, let's start with you. Dynasty, redraft, or both players to target on the Seahawks.
So the cheapest option for the passing attack is for the receivers, it's Lockett, and the tight end, it's Fant. If you're going for dynasty, you want Fant just because Lockett is getting older. He's going to be past his prime, and Fant is slowly getting into his prime. So that's the guy I would target. Metcalf is super expensive still, but he put up a 27% target share, which is very elite. So if, say, the Seahawks get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud next year, that would look very nice. So if you can pay up for him, do it. I am going to not touch either of these running backs this year. Like, it very much scares me just because I don't trust the line and I don't trust QB play. And I know Scott had a good piece on this, but I am in a wait and see approach. Like, I will pay attention to next year. And if, say, Walker struggles, his price drops, then I'll have interest. But just like right now, he's just too expensive for me. I don't really want to touch him. So basically, it's Like Metcalf or Fant are the two guys in Dynasty. In redraft, I'll just take Lockett because he's super cheap, and he's going to at least put up like a decent floor numbers. I don't want either quarterback if I don't have to touch them. So that's kind of where I'm at this year in redraft.
Unless they're your QB4 and Scott Fishbowl.
Yeah,
That's
then
right,
it's like,
that's right, yeah.
throw a dart, why not?
It's funny. I actually hedged my bet. I think I got Geno Smith in the Warrior Bowl. So one or the other. I'm hoping either way, and then they'll probably both get injured and then get Jimmy G. So who knows? I don't know. But
I'm in a dynasty league where I have quarterback issues, so I paid up some fab for Geno Smith, and it just felt strange. I took a shower afterwards and everything. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
it's
all dirty. Yeah.
Yep.
So I do agree. I think the best price versus value in redraft is Lockett. I think I was looking on my fantasy league, and he's like way back in the wide receiver 40 range. He's I mean, I get it. I get fading all the offensive players for Seattle with the current situation, but that's kind of ridiculous. I'm actually in redraft specifically, not in Dynasty, but in redraft, I've decided to take a stand, plant a flag in Rashad Penny.
Okay.
Part of the reason for that is, the team, as we've talked about it, they're going to have their first new quarterback in 10 seasons. They have some new personnel, so I don't think they're just going to throw a rookie running back to the Wolves in that scenario. Rashad Penny's been with the team for multiple years now. So, I mean, I think there's that aspect. I do think also it's like, with both Rashad Penny and David Montgomery last year, there was all this talk about, well, yeah, they smashed, but look at their opponents. But I've always had an issue with that. Like, if someone like Rashad Penny, if you look at the whole picture with him, he's battled a lot of injuries, and that sucks. Is that his fault? I don't know. It seems like once a player gets injured enough, people just start to be like, oh, you suck. You just get injured all the time. Whatever. He's been injured a lot. Before he got injured, he had an extremely good college prospect profile across the board. There's a lot of talk about should he have been drafted before Nick Chubb? I still say no to that, but I don't think it's as crazy outlandish. If you look at it objectively, get rid of the hindsight, it's not as outlandish as people think it is now. And I mean, what Penny did, like, it was ultimately, since his rookie year, it was his first healthy stretch of 6 games. First one. And he was the RB1. And, he, in some of those games, over 130 yards rushing. Like, again, I don't want to chase the yards and the touchdowns. I just think with that draft capital, with what he showed in college and with what he just showed with a offensive line that was ranked 25th by PFF. So it's not like it was some stellar offensive line he was running behind. He absolutely went ham. So I just think that I think it's going to start as his backfield. I don't think it's going to be like a 80-20 split. I think it'll be like 60-40, 65-35 in Penny's favor. But they signed him to a 1-year deal. I think it's his last year in Seattle. I don't think he's part of their future plans. I just think they're going to give him the ball quite a bit. So again, I've been using my fantasy league ADP data at least this week. I like to bounce around a little bit, and their redraft data currently has him as the RB33. And to me, I think that's a good deal. I think that's worth the risk of somebody. I mean, I don't think he necessarily has top 12 in his range of outcomes with Walker there, but I think he certainly has top 24. It's a risk. They could be a 50-50 split. That's just a big mess all year. Easily could be. But I'm not discounting those last 6 games just based on opponents. I think he is a good running back. So,
yeah, I would agree with that.
So
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Just kidding. Oh, and one last thing. I agree. Metcalf is still pretty expensive. Not as expensive as when he was the dynasty overall wide receiver one there for a minute. But if you're in a dynasty league, just keep an eye on him this year, because Jesse brought up a very good point. He could have a much better quarterback situation next year, or in the near future. But if he plays badly this year, even people that are in a dynasty mindset are going to fade on him, and his price will drop. So just keep DK. I think in redraft, I think he's already dropped too far. But in dynasty, just keep your eye on him, because just pick that time to strike.
It's been slowly dropping throughout ever since they traded Russell Wilson. He's just been slow. Like, if you go to keep charge cut and just watch it, and it's just
and somebody will post one of those on Twitter, like, who is this? And it's like this. It's like, oh, that's the guy.
Yep. And he still has like a ginormous upside. Like, he's proven what he can do. So Yeah, if you can get him for cheap, like that's very much someone I would happily target.
Yep.
And you just suffer through this year with him.
Yep.
And he'll still give you a baseline.
He'll still give you points this year. There's still gonna be points scored.
Yeah, no, I think in Dynasty, with Metcalf, you obviously know what he is. He's just a athletic freak of nature. Just get the ball in his hands, he's going to make it happen. In 2 startups I did this offseason, I actually was able to get him as my first wide receiver, one in the late 4th and the other in the 5th.
Wow.
So that's just like I'm running, smashing, spraining my thumb, pressing draft.
That's a huge deal. That late, that's.
So to me, that was just like silly. You know what I mean? So like I'm all about him in Dynasty. I know there's definitely like you're gonna take a little bit of a hit this year potentially, but I mean, again, if they get like a solid quarterback in the future, I'm not particularly we're worried about him in Dynasty. Redraft the players I'm targeting at cost are both Lockett and Fant, so we already covered those for all the same reasons. Lockett is just one of these players I like can't quit. I'm just going to be drafting him until the day he retires. I just love him so much.
Oh, yeah. He's very good.
No, he's phenomenal. Now for Dynasty, the player I would be fading would be Rashad Penny, just because it may be his last season in Seattle. But again, if you go in with like a anchor, like a hero RB build, and he's your RB2, I mean, you could have much worse options, in that case, because if you go with that approach, you're set up everywhere else. So I'm actually would be okay with that. Not really someone that I would be going out of my way to target in a dynasty league. But then in redraft, I actually would be basically fading him and Penny, or goodness, Penny and Walker, because I think it will be kind of an ugly split. I sound like very cautious about what that'll look like, but I do agree it is a very compelling case. A lot of the injuries that Penny has had have been like kind of like random. I'm not sure if they've been like reoccurring. I haven't exactly looked into that.
That's the thing. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not enough about the injuries. Like, I'm making a pretty general statement, but like, just doesn't. There's not 100% chance he's getting injured this year just because he has gotten injured.
But his rookie year in camp, he like broke his finger, and that like set him back like the first few weeks of the season. And I remember it was against the Eagles. Actually, he had this like 40-yard touchdown run.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's the kind of player this guy is. Like, he looks like an absolute stud. He just made our defense look like butter, So I think he's a very tricky case. But I think
it's a very risky flag to plant. I'm not known for flag planting, and so I decided to do one. Like here.
I'm wrong. I love it. Yeah, it's just it's a situation that I'm generally avoiding because I don't think they're going to be competitive. I just think like the game scripts are going to be like more often than not, of course, not in the favor of the running game, but they may just kind of lean on the running game anyway. Because if they
stop the Seahawks from running.
Right, exactly. So just for some of those reasons, I would generally as far as drafting a team, I would probably avoid them, but I would not hesitate to try to trade for one. That sort of is how I'm going to be approaching it from a team building perspective. But I mean, I'm even more intrigued now to see how a lot of this plays out. I mean, it may just be ugly from the fans' perspective of like the actual team like not performing well. But from the fantasy side of things, I'm really excited to see what happens with Geno. I'm really excited to see what happens with Drew Lock here in training camp in the preseason, and with what happens with the running back room. But because we kind of know what the wide receivers are, with Metcalf and Lockett and Fant, of course, and it will be interesting to see if any third wide receiver emerges, like maybe D. Eskridge or someone else. I'm not so sure, but it'll be. I am just very fascinated by the team and just kind of the dreary transition that they currently have in front of them. But definitely a exciting team to watch, and I appreciate you guys coming on. I think we have a very grounded idea, of what to expect from the Seahawks this year. I mean, you always want to see your team succeed, and if that's not always in wins and losses, you just want to see good process unfolding and good decision making unfolding, if it doesn't result in a win, it's kind of like the Lions last year, right? That it was like the best 3 or 4 win team in the league because they just really kind of like rallied around each other and Dan Campbell and everything else. And you can see a lot of like the good things happening, even though it's not resulting in wins, So either that would be my hope for the Seahawks this year. And then hopefully, things can turn around quickly. Just because of the nature of the division. It's just a tough one right now, but either way, appreciate you guys coming on. I appreciate both of your perspectives on everything. This was an absolute blast as far as I'm concerned. So just want you guys to go around, reintroduce where people can find you and find your work. We'll start with you, Jesse.
So you could find me on the old Bird app Twitter. It's JMoller05. I'm on there just posting a lot of different things. Some nonsense, some fun, a lot of cool facts, stuff like that. So if you want, my DMs are always open on there. And you can find a lot of my written work on theleaguewinners.com. And yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me.
Perfect.
Cool. Real quick, because it says IDP Guys Network. We didn't really talk about that at all, but played in my first IDP league last year, and I got Jordan Brooks pretty late. If you're in an IDP league startup, draft Jordan Brooks. Dude killed it for me last year. Anyway,
he's a tackle machine.
So yeah, my name's Scott Rainier. You can find me on Twitter at MunderDifflinFF. I produce content for In Between Media. I do it's like a bi-weekly column. We kind of combine life stories and anecdotes and just kind of advice and whatnot with fantasy football. So it's kind of both levels, and there's NASCAR and DFS golf and all sorts of things there. So I also co-host the podcast, which I did earlier tonight as part of my double dip. And I have a silly YouTube series called Pulp Fantasy, where I just I basically use movie quotes and TV and stuff like that to kind of compare it to football and just have a good time. It's pretty fun. And then I write articles for Fantasy Data, and that's exclusively just kind of data-driven, deep dive article writing. So, and I have a blast on Twitter. Come hang out.
Absolutely. Both of these guys are fantastic follows, just really low key, hilarious guys. Just very subtle. You have your very funny people who are just more loud and very like whatever. But either way, you guys I think are very funny, but also a lot of great information. I know that I always leave a lot of your threads, or the godforsaken threads. Your guys' information you tweet out. I always leave. I think a better football thinker because of it. And again, just really, I would say just sort of like the peak of what the community should be like, right? Just good guys, good information, lighthearted. It's just, you guys know what you're doing and it's working. So it's awesome. But yeah, I just want to touch on Jordan Brooks real quick. I cover mostly offense for the IDP guys at .org, but the one IDP league I do play in year over year is like a part like keeper league, but it's with my wife and like a bunch of her cousins on her side of the family. I rode Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks as my 2 linebackers through the playoffs and into the championship, actually beating my wife in the championship. So Jordan Brooks, stud, absolute tackle machine, as you guys said. Yeah,
I had Brooks and Roquan Smith in a scoring setting that was like very favorable for tackles.
Ooh,
So I couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh, Jordan Brooks got me 45 points again. Look at that.
Yeah, I love when it's like boosted scoring and not like depressed, and it's actually good. Because I have Roquan and I have TJ Watt in my IDP league, so I'm very happy with those 2.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
Thanks for the kind words. I think Jesse probably would agree. Comedy is a dish best served dry.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes,
for
that's
sure.
The way we like to roll.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, best of luck to you with your fantasy teams, with your content coming out this year. And of course, best of luck to your Seahawks. Have a great night. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
All righty. Take it easy.
See ya.